Hi everybody, it's Sam. Today I'd like to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while regarding self-injury. So, trigger warning, talk of self-injury. I'm probably not going to go into like graphic details on anything, but if anyone's uncomfortable with the subject, I'm going to do my thing where I pause and then you can like shut off the thing. So, okay. Okay, that should be enough time. Um, so I have dealt with self-injury since I was a teenager. um, for me, it's been about having a way to um, shut down my feelings when they come up, because I have had a lot of issues in my family with having a lot of verbal abuse around emotions and whenever I get upset, being told, you're crying for no reason, and just like making a huge thing out of it, a lot of like yelling at me on it, and just making me feel like horrible for expressing feelings and like I shouldn't be doing it. And all my life, I didn't have a way to like calm that down. I couldn't just have an experience, whatever, go through something like an argument and like be able to just like brush it off and like shake it off, like my parents were always telling me. And so, at one point I just, scratched at my arm or whatever with something and realized that gave me the ability to, like, concentrate and keep going, out of that moment and not have to deal with my feelings. And so that's where it started. I don't remember ever, like, reading about it and, like, that making me want to do it. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I don't think that I, like, picked it up from anything. I don't think you can really pick that stuff up. It's either, like, you want to, you feel like you need to do it or you don't. Anyway, so it was an off and on thing, and then once I got to Albany, we really started working on it. It took us a while, but we developed like a care plan, and my therapist is awesome about it and just so open, and we've really worked on like me expressing my feelings and feeling safer about that. But since then, I've wanted to like find a support group or a therapy group where that's like talked about, or even like in day treatment, and I just haven't been able to find anything. At the day treatment program I went to, from like August, I think, to like after the New Year's, we had groups and stuff, and when I came in, they said they dealt with it, and they were knowledgeable on it, but they're not, because in one of the groups, it was a media group, and we're watching this documentary about depression. And in this documentary, and I think that she should have known this was coming, the woman, because she should have watched the whole thing, and known what could trigger people. But in this documentary, this guy was saying, just mentioned how he cut himself, as part of his depression, and I think actually showed his scars, which is really triggering and just really would probably freak people out that don't know about it. So after the movie was finished, people were talking, and people were, especially this one person, was making really ignorant comments about, well, being suicidal in general and this self-injury, not understanding it, and people were just not understanding, and the therapist was just silent on the whole thing. And so I stood up for myself and everybody else that deals with it, and I said, this is what self-injury is. This is why it generally happens. This is, what it means. It's not, it's not this and this and that, and it's not selfish, and it's not whatever. And I explained it, and afterwards I asked the therapist, I'm like, well, that was kind of hard, and could we do like a documentary on it? I mean, there must be something out there that's not triggering, but that's, accurate and stuff like that. And she's like, oh no, that would be too intense for people, because usually people don't want to talk about that kind of thing. It's like, okay, I'm at a treatment center. Like, we should be able to talk about like anything. And she was just like, oh, well, they'd be too uncomfortable. And, I got it right away that she was uncomfortable. And I took it to the coordinator, who was my caseworker, and she's like, oh, well, it turns out that we don't really work with that. And, we think it's so specialized that we don't have the ability to, like, address it in groups. And we don't, this and that. And finally, I asked her, well, what else don't you address? And she's like, well, we can't work with anyone that has like eating disorders because, that's too specialized. And we have like an addiction group, but it's for like people in like later recovery. Like if someone was like in the beginning of recovery, we would send them somewhere else. And it's like, where would you send them? There's so few places in Illinois, and like this place could be the only place in the area that someone could go to. So I was pretty disgusted, and so I left them. I mean, they had good points, but that whole thing that turned me off. And I was looking for other programs, and there were some programs that dealt with, mood disorders and trauma and stuff like that included self-injury and what they work with and sounded very knowledgeable, but they were private pay. And so, that wasn't, option. So, I'm looking on the internet, and I also don't know if there's any, like, inpatient options, because I know when I've gone to the hospital, I've had various reactions from staff, including, like, thinking I'm psychotic and constantly asking about voices or, telling me I'm doing it for attention, and just, I have had very few good experiences on a unit talking about self-injury. I've had other clients that get it, which has been nice. And there were a couple of techs on the unit that had worked in the past with teenage girls on a psych unit or on a unit. And if you work with teenage girls in that setting, you're bound to have like cutting, like a lot of it. So those two sort of understood, but like the psychiatrist didn't understand and whatever. So, other people have said the same thing. They haven't had luck on inpatient. So I don't know if people have had, I wanted to know what people's experiences were on, this topic. And I know that, like, there's the Safe Alternatives program. And I read their book. I wasn't too impressed with it. It seemed really cognitive, behavioral, and it just didn't seem like something that would work, at least with me. They discouraged so much. They discouraged even, stuffed animals and doll, which I don't understand. I mean, some people get comfort out of those things, but they said you can't bring them, and, they discouraged any kind of physical expression of your feelings, which, like any kind of like exercise or, throwing something at a soft thing or, hitting a pillow or something, which could help people, and they discouraged that, and it just seemed like, it seemed very rigid. So I was interested in what people thought of the program if they've been there. I know that Alexian Brothers in our area in Illinois, about an hour away, has Center for Self-Injury Recovery Services, which sounds very good. Their day program, I talked to someone on the phone about it, sounded very good, but of course they don't accept Medicaid. They only accept child Medicaid or elderly Medicaid, because of some weird policy from the 60s where behavioral health hospitals can't accept adult Medicaid. I have no idea. But anyway, so, there's that. They wrote a book, which was a very good book, but they don't, like I said, they don't accept, but they're supposed to have a whole unit on it. But I read this review that said that the units in that hospital are really small. It's not, well maintained. There aren't very good groups. It's just all in it for the money, which really, surprised me, because it didn't seem like the type of place that, my impressions of it. The last place that I've heard of that deals with it is Timberline Knolls, which is in our area. It's a residential place for girls, and they deal with eating disorders and trauma and I think addictions, and they also deal with self-injury, it says on their website. And I've seen some YouTubers doing some really good videos on TK and saying how good it is, and I was just curious what people's thoughts were on how they treated the self-injury over there. I'd assume places that do DBT would be knowledgeable on it. However, I have my doubts now, because I've heard some people that have gone to DBT and they haven't gotten anything to help them with it. Or I know at our place, which doesn't surprise me, we had a DBT group, and it was very interesting, and I liked it. It was like a condensed version of it, because it was a short, each term was like, I don't know, 6 weeks or something, so we didn't have the time each like group cycle to do the whole thing. But there was a short little thing on self-injury, and literally the therapist was like, okay, this is like the section on self-injury, like if you experience this, like talk to your therapist about it. Like, excuse me, really? Anyway, so yeah, that's what I was just curious about, if anybody had had any experiences with inpatient or outpatient treatments specifically to self-injury, what their experiences have been. and I could have that information for myself or my friends, or, I really advocate for people online, and so the more I know about different stuff, the better. So if anyone has any comments, that would be great. I also did a post about that on my blog, and so this video is going to go on my blog as well. Okay, so I'll talk to you all later. Thanks, bye.